So in the last videos we have done the medium tanks and the tank destroyers, and now we're going to be moving on to the light tanks. So number 1, finish as top player on your team by experience earned and win the battle. Any tank you want, you know, it's just going to be your favorite tank, and eventually this will happen. For number 2, spot 8 enemy vehicles and survive the battle. Something that's probably going to be passive. The one thing that I do want to say is when it says spot 8 enemy vehicles, it doesn't clarify whether it needs to be the first time spots or not. If it needs to be the first time spots, you're going to need to pick something that is probably quite fast, because like some of the more passive vehicles like the even 90, yes, it's fast, but it's not, you know, rapid. So if you need to spot 8 enemy vehicles and then go back and survive, but they need to be first time spots, you could probably just do that in like a EBR, like EBR 105, because you just go straight up, get the spots, back off, and just hope that your team wins, so that you can survive the battle. If you win, then it's great because you only get it with honors as well. If it doesn't need to be first time spots, then don't worry about that, because you can just sit in any old bush and just hope that you spot someone 8 times. For number 3, damage 6 enemy vehicles by shooting them, and then spot 6 enemy vehicles. Now remember, you can go all the way down to tier 6 to do these missions, and I would recommend you choose the type 64, because this is going to be a lot easier in lower tier to do, you know, shoot someone 6 times to do damage and then spot 6 enemy vehicles in a lower tier rather than the higher tier, where they start to do a bit more damage and it's just going to be a bit of a longer reload. Whereas a type 64, you can easily shoot someone 6 times. It doesn't say that it needs to be different enemy vehicles, so it could just be the same person. I'm hoping that that's how it is and not 6 separate enemy vehicles, but I think that it's just one. But yeah, type 64 I'd recommend for this. And if you haven't got a premium, let's see, where you can't afford a type 64, then probably something like you could do it with the T37. That's got a pretty nice reloading gun, 3.7 seconds. Yeah, and that's kind of fun to play with as well. I mean, alternatively, you could go with like an AMX12T, and then you can actually just clip someone, because then that's 4 shells done instantly. That works as well. Thinking about it, the best vehicle for this is actually... wait, do I not have it? Oh, I don't think I have it. Wait. This thing. Preview. This has a 8 shell magazine with a 1-second interclip. So you could just go up and park next to someone, fire your 8 shells and run away. And you've done your entire mission. And as long as you spot 6 enemy vehicles, you're fine. Now for number 4, it's a little bit of a... not hard, but just annoying. Because you got to track 3 different enemy vehicles. And your team has to do 500 damage while they are immobilized. I recommend you get in a platoon with someone and you fire HE at people's tracks. That's the easiest way to do it. HE is going to do more damage to the tracks than if you're just firing AP, even if they have hardening, if you have a high enough caliber, which you probably aren't going to have because it's a light tank mission, but it's a lot easier with HE. So you could do this with something like the Type 64 again, or you could do this with like an autoloader. The only problem is that I wouldn't really recommend you do it with an autoloader, because one, you're going to have to fire HE and it's going to be quite annoying. Especially with a full HE clip. And 2, it's just not going to be very useful when you're on that long reload. So you want something that's got a fast enough reload, but also does enough alpha damage. Now, the best vehicle is probably like a T54 lightweight, because you get the 100mm gun, which does a nice amount of damage. You can also load HE, and you do a decent amount of damage there. And it has enough armor to kind of just become medium. And if you choose 2 other medium tanks to go in a platoon with you, this will get done really, really easily, hopefully. Depending on the right map and stuff like that. If you get Himmelsdorf or something like that, this should be a breeze to do. If you have 2 vehicles that are autoloaders, so you could have, say, 2 bat chats with you, and then you go along, get your free tracking shots, get your buddies in the bat chat, just shoot them instantly, and then that's your 500 damage done. For number 5, this one isn't that bad, because as long as you just get into a position and just sit there and wait, you just need either Prokhorovka, Malinovka, something like that, and as long as they kill them, you'll be fine. The only hard part is to survive, because if you lose the game, it's going to be quite hard to stay alive most of the time because they'll just dig you out. So just be patient with this one. It will eventually happen. Any tank that you enjoy, realistically, there's not really like any damage requirements or anything like that. So it's just play a tank that you enjoy. The exact same thing goes for light tank number 6, because this is just enable your allies to cause damage to 6 enemy vehicles by spotting them or immobilizing them. Just get into a bush and just play a tank that you enjoy, and this will eventually happen. Exactly the same as the last one. Luckily, you don't have to survive or anything like that, so this one shouldn't be too bad. Spot and cause damage to 2 enemy SPGs. Probably you're going to want to choose something that is fast enough, so go low tier. You could do it in a Type 64 because it's going to do a lot of damage in that kind of quick succession, so you can get your 2 damaging hits in and you'll be able to spot them, hopefully, if you just survive long enough towards the end of the game. I wouldn't bother trying to do this in a high tier because it's quite a bit more RNG involved, I feel. One, the SPGs will do a lot more damage to you, and 2, you're relying on your team at higher tier is very annoying, let's say. Whereas with lower tier, you can actually kind of outplay a lot of people by just knowing the game. So you can easily get through to the SPGs and just go around people, whereas in tier 10, it's a lot easier to get spotted. Everyone has higher view range, everyone has bigger tanks and does more damage. It's a lot easier to do this at lower tier than higher tier, I feel. The only other way that you could do it is like an autoloader and just be patient at the end of the game. But once again, you're going to need a game first where you have 2 artillery, and then secondly, you're going to need to be able to shoot them twice and spot them. So it's going to be a little bit awkward some of the time. And now for my personal favorite mission, the capping mission. Why they have a capping mission in the game, I don't know, but ignore the first one and go for the defensive one. Unless you get a very, very nice, easy way of capping, you need to be careful though, because you need to do 60 points of capping and do a successful capture. So you need to personally have 60 points on the cap when it is fully captured, at least, for it to count and win the game. The easiest way of doing this is resetting the cap when it is at 60 points. I mean, you could do this where you shoot multiple targets. It doesn't all have to be on one person. So you can spread those 60 points out. So it's not too bad for the defensive one because it's a lot easier to decap than cap for 60 points and then win the game. So just keep that in mind, that at the back of your head, decap is an option. And a lot of people just think, oh, capture base, capture base. That's the only thing they think about. They don't think about the decapping bit, where the decap most of the time is a lot easier. And being a light tank, you can get back to base relatively quickly if you do need to. Light tank 9, something like an even 90, or anything that has a very, very nice amount of camo. You could do this in an EBR, for example, on Prokhorovka, and just hope that you don't get spotted early on. Now, be warned, I don't know, because it doesn't say, which is the most annoying thing, if it's first time spots. Because when it just says spot, I could go and spot someone that's already been spotted and it might not even count. Whereas if you need to do first time spots for 6 enemy vehicles or remain unspotted, that's a lot harder. And I do remember that some of these need to be first time spots. And you can't just do these just when they've already been spotted and they just pop up again when you spot them. So if this does need to be first time spots, probably an even 90 is the best bet. Or just find something that has a lot of camo and just sit in a bush, and eventually this will be done. You can do this on quite a few maps. It doesn't just have to be like, Prokhorovka or Malinovka or something like that. There's quite a few maps that you can actually play on to get this done. Now for light tank 10, this is relatively easy. Again, favorite tank. You don't have to really worry about this. It's be top player by experience earned and survive the battle. For completion with honors, usually survive and winning go hand in hand. Like usually if you survive the game, you've won the game unless you get capped or the time runs out or something like that. So usually you'll complete this with honors when you complete the primary condition. Now for light tank 11, Type 64, it's the easiest way. You could go T37 as well if you don't have a Type 64, or even you could choose the AMX 1357 and do basically this in 2 clips. So hopefully you find someone that is the same tier or higher, and it should just be relatively easy to do. Light Tank 12 is where it gets a little bit more challenging, but as long as you understand light tanks, this should be relatively simple. You need to make sure that you are the one that is spotting them. 3000 HP might sound like a lot, but if you go up to tier 10, it's not a lot. You could easily get 3000 HP of damage on Prokhorovka, Malinovka, something like that. You do need to have a good spotting map, usually, because you need to remain unspotted at the time of their damage. So when the enemy is getting damaged by your spotting, you need to be unspotted at that time. If you get spotted later on down the line, it doesn't matter. But when you actually spot them and they take damage, you need to be the one that is unspotted. T100 LT, Manticore, even EBR, that can all work. Just be careful with the EBR. Don't play it like an idiot and just drive off into the middle and then die like most EBR players do. But Manticore, you could do this pretty easily in because that thing is basically invisible unless you get into proxy with the right equipment set up. Now, this one is probably the hardest mission out of all of them. I'm not even exaggerating here. Enable your allies to cause 2000 HP of damage when they're spotted by you. That's fine. You could do that in, tier 9, tier 10, tier 8 even. This isn't a problem. Even tier 6 you could do this in. However, causing 2500 HP of damage at the same time is difficult. With light tanks, you can easily forget that you have a gun. So you're going to want a gun that is good enough, and I would recommend you choose a T54 light tank or a T100 LT to do this mission in, because they have by far the best guns out of all the light tanks, and they have armor. So you can actually go and be like a medium tank, and you should be able to get 2000 HP relatively easily. Just spot for a little bit and then go and get the damage. Win the battle and survive. I wouldn't even bother with honors. I done them, but it doesn't really matter too much. The only ones that you need to do with honors is light tank 15 if you want the skip orders. T54 light tank or the T100 LT are my choices. You could maybe do it in a WZ, but do you really hate yourself that much? For light tank 14, this is relatively easy. Exactly the same thing as light tank 12. You just need to do a little bit more, but you don't need to get, unspotted or anything. Like, you don't need to be unspotted at the time of their damage. So you could do it in an EBR relatively easily. Like, you could do this in an EBR within like the first 2 minutes of a game, or even the first minute of the game. Just by driving all the way up to the middle, spotting everyone, they'll take some damage. That's an easy 1000 damage done, and then you just get into a bush and just rinse and repeat. So anything that you feel comfortable with, that you'll get this amount of damage as spotting, do it in. Now for light tank 15, this one isn't actually that bad. Out of all the level 15 missions, this one is probably one of the easiest, because the only problem with this is to complete it with honors, because one, you have to win the battle, which is annoying, but two, you have to enable your allies to destroy 5 enemy vehicles with your spotting or by immobilizing them. Usually you can get 8000 HP combined relatively easy in tier 10 for light tanks if you get on the right map, and that is all that it requires. Just get on the correct map and you will do this. As long as you understand light tanks and how the camo mechanics work and stuff like that, and you are competent enough in light tanks, you can do this relatively easily. I'm pretty certain I'd done this in an EBR, but pretty much any tier 10 light tank is capable of doing this. Even like the good old RHM, it could do this if you really wanted to. Probably EBR, Manticore. Manticore could do this just on spotting alone. If you just get into the correct bush, and even the T100 LT. Anything that's a tier 10 light tank, even some of the tier 9s, depending on if you're good in them or not. But 8000 might seem like a big number, but when it's fully combined, where it doesn't matter if you do tracking damage and spotting, like those two, it doesn't matter. It's not like Marks of Excellence where it only picks one of them to add to combined. You could do, say, 4000 damage and then get 2000 tracking damage, or sorry, 4000 spotting damage and then do 2000 tracking damage and you've just done 6k combined, and then just get 2k damage and you're done. So don't really think about this too much, and like with the rest of the level 15 missions, kind of just set it and just forget. Set it and forget, because that is the best way of doing it. So hopefully that helps you out with your light tank missions, and you can get your 260 in no time at all. If you did enjoy, then you know what to do. And yeah, let me know your opinions on light tanks and what light tanks to choose for the different missions, because obviously these are just my opinions and what I've done for those missions. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I'll see you all in the next video.